Welcome to the Shifting People podcast, where we go deep into the weeds with leaders on the front lines of people management in the service industry. We interview the best minds in HR and talent acquisition, along with owner-operators, franchisees, and general managers to bring you real insights that you can actually apply in your business today. I'm your co-host, Derek Williamson.
And I'm Kathleen McDonough, and it's time to get to work. Today we have Chris Harris, Human Resources Director at CARC Inc. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Excited to have you.
Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about what you do at CARC and maybe how you got there.
Sure. So I have been in the human resource endeavor for about 18 plus years. I actually got transitioned into that. I was a paramedic at a large metropolitan EMS organization, and the director at the time wanted to reorganize. He needed an HR person. So I had an interest in human resources for a long time, but had never explored it fully. I was given the opportunity to move into that role and help develop that. And then I just took off from there. So I've been at the current organization for about 2.5 years, and it's great because we do a lot of things with folks with developmental disabilities.
That's awesome. Yeah. And what's the day-to-day look like right now for your job? Like, where do you find you're spending most of your time?
Certainly. Right now, of course, it's as we're getting into end of year, we look at our open enrollment coming up and the holidays and things of that nature. But we spend a lot of time looking at recruitment and retention activities. And of course, culture plays into that as well. So that's kind of the three areas that I work with. I have a really great team. So they handle a lot of the usual day-to-day tactical activities that allows me to focus more on the strategy and the higher level. How does our benefits, for example, because we're in that time of year, how does that help retain folks? How does that recruit? Things of that nature.
Yeah, and a lot there I want to get into, but before we do, what is CARC Inc? Can you explain it for everyone listening, what it is you guys do there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. CARC Inc. was founded in the 70s by Bob and Barbara Forrest. They had a son that was born with Down syndrome. And they wanted their child to have all the normal activities that children have. However, being that time and in southeastern New Mexico, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for that. So they founded CARC to help promote services and socialization of folks with developmental disabilities. It has grown into the organization that we have today. We've got about 170 employees. We take care of, I believe, about 62 clients and mostly adults. However, we have two programs. We have an on-site daycare. So we have a number of employees that have children in the daycare, but we also have a number of community members who have children in the daycare as well. And then we have a program that we just renamed to Milestone Memories, I believe is the change. There was some different title names bouncing around, so forgive me not having that completely memorized. But in that program, we work with youth ages 1 to 3, 1 to 4 in the community to help identify potential children that might have developmental disabilities, developmental delays, and connect them with services so that they hopefully get the assistance they need to better be prepared as they go into the educational setting.
Got it. Yeah. So you see a couple different sides here through CARC, because you're also seeing there's interesting conversations when we talk about the workforce, and especially unemployment right now is still fairly low. And then that's when finally people start to recognize, like, hey, maybe we need to look at some other groups that are currently disenfranchised by the current labor market. And so it sounds like through the work that CARC does, you see a little bit of that as well, where a lot of folks with developmental delays or differences can still participate in the workforce. They can still hold jobs. They can still do those things. And so it sounds like you see that side, but also obviously managing a team as well yourself and the sort of regular day to day.
Certainly. Yeah, and we're unique in a number of the organizations throughout New Mexico. We have the sub-minimum wage certificate. So a lot of our clients actually get up every morning and go to a job in the workplace. We have a vocational, what we call the vocational department or vocational setting. They go in and work in the greenhouses. They work in our pecan processing. We have some orchards on site, so they can come in and process those, which we turn around and sell. And that money goes back in to help support the programs for them. And a number of other different things. We've got a lawn care, janitorial. Some of that is done on our campus. Some of it is done in the community. So they get to interact with the community as well, which is really great because that helps, one, helps improve their life and their workforce or their work experience, but it also helps the community see the work that we do as an organization.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So you're developing people like through the organization itself and giving folks like whether it's work experience, skills, life skills, all those kind of things. And then for your employees, for the organization's employees, I'm sure it's very rewarding work, but also wondering on the topic of development, how do you think about development there? What's that look like within an organization like yours?
Certainly, we've got a learning management system, and employees are able to complete various pre-assigned courses. And as they complete, we've grouped some of those together in modules. So when they complete a module, they're eligible for an increase. So one, it gives them some incentive to complete some development. But two, we open up the whole course library. So they're not limited to strictly those courses. They can go out, if there's particularly a course that they find of interest, they can self-enroll and do that as well. My HR team, we actually have a subscription to an HR-based learning management program, and I've encouraged them to participate in those. I, like I said, I had initially assigned and said, in your given role, I want you to complete this program. But again, they have full access. So if they go, I really want to know more about compensation and benefits or AI, they can explore those topics as well. And it's been well received.
Yeah, that's really cool. And obviously, learning is something you're passionate about, not only for your employees, but for veterans too, right? Like veterans in the job market. I know you're passionate about that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly. We don't have a lot of veterans working here, and that's one of the areas that we want to focus on recruitment because veterans typically do a great job. They make great employees. But two, if we have an opportunity to help mentor or educate a veteran, be that something as helping look at their resume or helping transfer those military skills, because a lot of times people get out of the military and they've got that mindset that, yes, I know how to do X, but how does that translate into the civilian workforce? That might include anything from helping them transition through that verbally within the resume or saying, okay, here's what I want you to do. Let's sit down and do some mock interviews. So we've done some of that as well. We don't do a lot of it, but certainly we're open to helping folks, particularly veterans, be prepared to enter the civilian workforce.
Yeah, which is super important. So you get to help on multiple fronts, right? And developing people. I do love the idea also of, you mentioned in the LMS, opening it up so that employees can take on other things that are just of interest. Because interesting on the topic of HR, in a few recent episodes, we've talked about this, like the HR knowledge gap, where a lot of folks in HR, you forget like that most other people don't have base knowledge of what we think of as common sense HR things, and especially more in restaurants, retail, those kind of things, where you have managers with no HR training who are often involved in hiring process, who are involved in performance feedback and reviews. And so the LMS side made me think of, gosh, why do more organizations not open some of their HR training and modules to the rest of the team as well? But that's an interesting approach, and I'm sure many employees do take on, like, just explore other interests.
Certainly. Yeah, we've got one employee that she came in and said, I've got my module done, and I opened up her transcript and it's full. She's got, and like she said, I go home and she's got a break because of the way a part of our schedules work. The employee comes in and helps the client get up and get around and go to work, and then they're off till the afternoon when the client gets off work and comes back to the residence. She said a lot of times I just go home and my kids are grown up, so I sit down and plug through a course. Most of them are anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, so she can knock out two or three, and it's great. You talked about the leadership perspective. Yeah, I would love to do more training with my employees on a one-on-one or in a small group setting, but we're as managers, we're all facing the challenges of trying to find time to dedicate to employee development and still get our productivity done for the day. So the LMS is a great way for us to bridge that. And it has worked some. We've got some areas that we need to continue to focus on. But I think it helps us as an organization to put some of that out there and give them some experience or base knowledge, if you will, and then we can follow up organizationally and say, okay, this is an area that's really important, or this is an area that we've identified that needs some additional context so we can go in and do some more specific training.
Yeah, you always want to be prepared with what is wanted and needed in terms of training. And sometimes it can be hard to figure that out in an organization that is so big and doing so many different things. But the opening up the LMS, it kind of makes people like raise their hand and say, "Yep, I'm in search of this type of training on this topic." And you look at that, what people are doing, and you say, "Oh, people are interested in this," or these certain people want more. They're going a little bit above and beyond. So, has it helped you at all notice specific people that are, or help with like finding people for promotion or different roles, or people just to invest in more?
I think so, because we can look and see what folks are taking, but also going out and visiting with your supervisors. I spend much more time in my office than I like. I really like to be able to get out and deal with the workforce and visit with folks and see what's going on day to day. And talking with the supervisors, a lot of times I think it's very important to see where can we help you. And that's where I've tried to frame some of that, because I don't want to come out and say, I'm the big bad HR and by gosh, you need to know how. It's how can I support you in what you have to do in dealing with our workforce? And that context, it's a small shift, but it really helps the supervisor not feel like, oh, here comes HR again, who's in trouble, or what do they want us to do now? To me, it's more of a partnership to help improve our workforce through the supervisor. Like Derek said, may not have those skill set or those base knowledges that needs. And we have folks that'll do that. They'll call and say, I've had an employee ask me this question, and sometimes it's on policy, sometimes it's on, I think this employee is not performing well. How do I approach getting them back on track and things of that nature? So I think it's been a really good segue to help them develop.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea of like, how can I help you? Showing up, having it be a relationship. And something you're very active on LinkedIn, and it's a wealth of like information and exciting like topics to that you explore there. One of them you posted about recently was the hidden power of the stay interview. Can you explain what a stay interview is and kind of like how you've used it?
Certainly. A stay interview and it's been around since probably the late 80s, early 90s. I started seeing the terminology being used, which kind of dates me a little bit, but basically it's being proactive to visit with folks before they're sitting in your office conducting the exit interview because they're resigning. It's that opportunity for you to go out either through a survey platform, and most organizations would say we do engagement surveys. I think engagement surveys have their place, but I don't think it does the same as a stay interview. One, I typically use those to target individuals looking like when I was in EMS, one of the things I looked at was kind of seeing when people were leaving the organization. And we found that our entry level medics were leaving at about 5 years. Our frontline leaders were staying for about 10 years and they were leaving. So I started trying to target those groups, those employees in the 3 to 5 year range, and then again at about the 8 to 9 year range to say, hey, what are you thinking a year or two down the road? Because most people, if you say, what are you thinking for 5 years from now? They struggle with trying to figure out what they're having for dinner next week. And that's okay because I'm the same way. But
Yeah.
to sit down and say, what are your long-term goals? How can we help you stay in the organization and be satisfied and be productive? Because it's a partnership. Productivity and satisfaction, they're mutually exclusive, but they're really not. An employee that's not engaged and satisfied isn't going to be as productive. We know that. But I think if we're able to sit down with those employees beforehand and see, you might be able to identify areas that are larger in context and thereby change your strategy for retention is what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. And did you see results of that? Did you see people staying longer? And
We did a little bit. In that particular context, we were somewhat limited because we were part of a larger county organization. So one department wasn't going to be able to entirely influence the larger organization in some respects, but it gave us some data to start working with to say, look, here's what it's costing you to replace that medic, and not just the person that comes in the door and has the requisite skills and license. We're talking about that experience that you gain in dealing with patients, and you see those things and you start learning those things. But two, just the drain on the workforce morale. Well, Joe left. Wow, he was really good. And it causes a problem in the larger workforce. So we were able to shift some of our strategies at the department level, but then we also took that data to the larger department or the organization as a whole and said, hey, this is what we're seeing, be it wages, benefits, working conditions, and things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad we got into that because I think in many industries, especially like the folks that may be tuning into this podcast, these kind of things are not as common. And I think it's a really good one to highlight. And it's also very timely because the most recent episode we just recorded was actually, we talked about engagement surveys. So it's really useful to couple, like that's one tool in the toolkit, but it's not a catch-all. There's different things that serve different purposes. And I think it's also really useful for folks that are wearing the HR hat, but are not HR folks. We've got a lot of small business owners or things like that too. And Chris, I would love to talk, because you've got a depth of experience here. I would love to talk about hiring and how you think about hiring. I know you're not on the front line necessarily of that right now. You have in a bigger organization, but curious your thoughts on that. And I know you have some thoughts around like the use of AI and involving in that, but let's start with just what kind of philosophy you've developed around hiring, what kind of things you look for, just any thoughts you can share there.
Sure. Because I work in a people related industry, which is much different than a manufacturing industry, and there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But the guy that's going to assemble a product on a manufacturing line doesn't need to have the heart and passion that you need when you're dealing with people, be that healthcare, hospitality, retail, any of those industries in which you're dealing with folks. You need to have a passion to deal with that. And that's one of the things that we really need to look at when we're recruiting for talent. I can hire somebody that knows how to take care of a patient from a process perspective, doing vital signs or making sure their diet's correct and things like that. But what I really look for is the person that's going to walk with the client, not walk ahead of the client while they're looking at their phone and look over and go, okay, come on, hurry up. You need to hurry up. And because those are not the people that are going to take the time to interact with the clients. And those are the things that I really enjoy when I do my stay interviews. or when I'm actually just out visiting with the workforce, is those people that comment about, I'm here for the clients. The clients make my day, things of that nature, because then I know we've made a good hire or we have a really good employee because they have a passion for what they're trying to do when they're here. Yeah, the pay is important, the benefits are great, but at the end of the day, again, you're dealing with people, and I think that becomes very important. So that's one of the major things we look for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you cross applied it to many different industries as well, right? Because there's that sort of connection with people, that desire to serve or help people in some way, everything from helping clients in your organization, but also serving customers in a restaurant. There's got to be a sort of innate or a cultivated drive. It's very hard to train that into someone. You can train all the hard skills on top, but if you don't have that initial sort of spark, pretty hard to grow. And so, with that said, I would love to ask about your thoughts on, we're seeing a lot of AI stuffed into all over organizations, of course. There's a lot going on in hiring and recruitment. And I'm curious your thoughts, especially thinking about roles where we're not looking at hard skills necessarily. This isn't, yes, they check these 5 boxes on a resume. Definitely they're going to be a good fit. There's a little more transaction that has to happen. So curious on your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think AI is a useful tool. But, and again, like you said, to identify those hard skills, if you will, or those competencies that you're looking for, it's a great place to help narrow that down. But at the end of the day, if you're dealing with people, you've got to speak to people. And we try and interview everybody unless there are a few exceptions. If we have somebody, for example, I recently had a person apply, we're looking for a lifeguard. They, all the skills, they had the certifications, they had the experience, they had all that stuff. Unfortunately, he's overseas and requires sponsorship through the visa. We simply don't have that opportunity to do that. So we had to decline that candidate. If he was here in the United States, we would have interviewed and probably extended an offer, unless he came in and just really bombed the interactive side of it. So there are times that we don't, and has some potential to do that. For example, if they're required to be a driver and they don't have a driver's license or something along those lines, it can help you identify that. But I think I I'm concerned that we may get too comfortable with using AI, and by doing so, exclude that human element, if you will. And of course, it depends on the industry too, like we talked about earlier. If you're looking for somebody that has the mental capability to assemble something or things of that nature, the AI may be much more useful versus a people or service related industry where it's not as, I don't think it's going to be as helpful.
Yeah, and you have to be careful too because of the ethics of it. You teach a bit of that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I teach adjunct for a couple of different colleges and do HR courses. And we want to be cognizant of that. Not just AI, but anything that we do. And unfortunately, SHRM, not to belittle that whole thing, but recently got into the whole ethics and some of those issues. So I think it's important that we start teaching that to our young professionals that understand ethics is important and you have to keep that as a focus, because if you don't, you're going to end up, and it's not just SHRM, you can see evidence of a number of organizations where ethics has been the lost focus and things of that nature.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like I think AI specifically starts to bring it, like it's just uh, it's a conversation that people are having more often now, but you're right in that, like, the overall like ethics within organizations, and when we talk about especially within like people functions, the conversations about bias and discrimination and those kind of things come up, and there's a real shift to thinking like that AI will somehow remove bias. And it's almost like I think some employers are thinking, oh, okay, this solves it. Now I can wash my hands of it. Because the company said on their website that it removes bias, you have to have that core thinking. You have to be thinking about the ethics of something to question some of those claims or question, does this make sense for the type of roles that we're actually recruiting for? Like you said, right? Like more technical roles, more hard skill type roles, maybe it can work versus other ones. But curious, what are your thoughts on that in terms of like where we're going with AI in general and hiring and like what problems are we glossing over when organizations are jumping to, oh, AI is the solution?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a really good question because certainly a lot of organizations, and I'm guilty of it too. It's and not so much from the hiring context, but oh, I need to draft a letter for something. So you jump on your favorite AI tool and go, hey, draft me a letter, so many words, I want it to say this, and boom. And you scan over it and go, yeah, it's great. Not thinking about, like you said, the bias or any discriminatory issues. And that's a high level example. But when you transfer that to technology in the workplace, be it recruitment or LMS or anything, you can't just say, good, we're good to go. We turned it on. The company said we're awesome, that we don't have to worry about any of that. I don't think that absolves us as leaders to just take it at face value. I think we need to investigate that and see, are there issues, be it biases or gaps, because maybe it's not identifying that perfect candidate pool. Like you said, we've talked about somebody with passion for the job. Does AI help us identify that? Or is it more of an exclusionary device because it's only able to look at must have 3 years experience, must have a bachelor's degree, must have whatever those are. And I don't know that we'll get there. And I say that at some point AI may develop enough that it is able to discern some of that, but I don't think we're at that point yet. And that's where I find some of the limitations with AI to say we have to be careful that it's not a one and done solution.
Yeah. And where I get especially concerned is even before this current wave, right? There were tools out there that would record an interview and tell you sentiment of the candidate interviewing and things like that. And first of all, this is a shaky science to begin with.
Yeah.
But second of all, we are now taking sentiment to extrapolate to soft skills or things like that, like really far from it. And we're still in that gray zone, right? And the challenge is like some of these newer technologies maybe don't make it as obvious what the shortcomings are. And so we have to be pretty vigilant. Does that ring true to you as well, Chris? I think it's really going to the first principles of it, right? Thinking about what are we trying to accomplish? What is actually important? Whether it's, I like that you also highlighted, it could also just be in day-to-day communication and things like that, right? Because by definition, LLMs, the chat GPTs, they will spit out average content, right? And average does not include everyone, right? It includes
Exactly.
right at the middle. So I think it's just a really good call out and good one for folks to think about.
Yeah, and I liked your example with the video response. I had applied for a job at one point and they sent out this video interview and it had the typical Zoom type screen and stuff and it said, okay, you'll have 30 seconds to answer this question. And then it would pop up the question and it would start recording right away. And you didn't have any time to consider, you didn't know what the question was in advance, and it was making judgments based on that. And of course, I didn't see the backside, so I don't know if the interviewer was able to watch that or whatever. But like you said, technology is a great thing, and we should leverage it when we can. But you can't just turn the switch on and walk out of the room and expect it to do what it needs to do. You have to keep a pulse on it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
People
you've
need to be
made some
part
good
of the
points.
process. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. You explore a lot of this stuff, a lot of these topics on your LinkedIn. And we'll put a link to your LinkedIn so people can go and you'll be surprised and delighted about the topics every day, like a new one. I get really excited to see them every day. What kind of inspired you to start posting on social media and being active and exploring different topics on social media?
Sure. Like we talked about earlier, I teach for a couple of colleges and I enjoy doing that. And I thought there's probably other folks out there that just, and it's not necessarily a teaching thing, but it's just to make folks aware. Maybe there's a change coming forth. And so I started there and started looking at different things and saying, maybe we could get increase engagement trying to exchange ideas and information. And so I just went from there. And it's a work in progress. I'll be honest with you. There's some days I start writing stuff and it's not where I want to go with it. Either put it aside or scrap it, but try to put stuff out there to make folks think or just to make them aware of it. I recently did a podcast, or excuse me, not a podcast, a post. Sorry, it's wrong terminology there, on the use of Narcan by the public. It's not an HR related topic, but it does have some HR application because you're going to start seeing it show up in your first aid kits. You're going to start seeing it organizations going, why don't we have Narcan? And then, of course, the broader prospect of that was, do you really want employees coming to work that might need Narcan? So it did have a little bit of an HR spin to it, but the bigger context was, let's open this up for dialogue because this is an area we need to be concerned about as the world evolves.
Yeah,
And AI is one of those areas. I'm not an expert by any means, but I find it interesting and I like to explore it. And certainly, so to me, social media was a good platform to do that.
yeah, it's very similar to what we're doing here, right? These conversations need to be had. There's so many big, it seems heavy things happening in the world right now. AI, the labor market, Narcan, the issues there, and talking about it will help us define our views on it and maybe help bring about solutions and change and stuff like that. Yeah, I love your idea behind why you post. It's very similar to ours. I also like what you brought up there about challenging yourself. And as someone who has done the same thing this year, it's really hard, right? Some days you're really inspired and you've got something and you could write for days. Other days it's like pulling teeth trying to like think of an idea of something to what do people want to hear? What do people want to talk about? So it's tough and I admire that you do it day in and day out, challenge yourself and open up a platform for people to chat and explore ideas.
Certainly, thank you. Yeah, it's a labor of love by some standards, but I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the interaction I get with folks.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put the link again so people can interact with it. And just want to say, as we wrap up here, thank you so much for coming on. I know you are a busy guy, and it was great to have you to hear your kind of like thoughts on things and your journey as well.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Kathleen, another great conversation.
Yeah, Chris is fantastic. I think you can tell from what I said, but I like following along his journey on LinkedIn. I like the thought provoking kind of topics he explores every day. It makes me think when he posted about Narcan, at first I looked at it and I was like, what does this have to do with HR? I love that he explained that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, I think the most progressive organizations, like their HR functions, broaden the definition of HR to like just talking about people and
Yeah.
people issues. And there are topics that are difficult, right? Drug use is a real topic though, right? You're not helping it if you just ignore it,
Yeah.
or in the workplace if you only respond when someone's caught using or something like that. And so, yeah, I think bringing some of those things to the forefront and, like you said as well, like figuring out how to talk about it and have those conversations is really valuable.
Yeah. It's super important. Derek, we talked about a lot of stuff. So I feel like narrowing down a shifting question is going to be a little difficult. Were you able to do it or will you now on the spot?
I will do it a little bit on the spot. We
Yay.
did cover a lot of topics. I felt like we moved through a lot, but did get some good scratch beneath the surface on a few.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm thinking about is, like Chris mentioned, with their LMS implementation, that they've opened it up so employees are assigned their specific domain modules, but then they can also access modules about other topics, other functions in the organization. And it's dual purpose, right? Like, number one is the employees get to skill up, and we know that's important in terms of motivation, et cetera. But also, I think if nothing else, it also can maybe give a more appreciation for what other roles in a company do. And
Yeah.
so by shifting question, I think we have to acknowledge that not everyone has an LMS
Yep.
or necessarily training materials that are nice and polished and pre-recorded on videos or things like that. But all organizations have some element of training documents, handbooks, guides, things like that. And so I challenge folks to think, where can you maybe open that up a little bit more? I think it's maybe tempting. Let's use like a retail business, for example. It's tempting to say, oh, the frontline employees, the cashiers, et cetera, they don't need to see some of the management training. They don't need to see any of these other things that aren't relevant to their role. But why not? It helps them learn about, I'm sure many employees don't understand all of the jobs that all the tasks that managers have to do, for example. But also, if they have an interest in management, it's that first step towards moving towards that. So that's my challenge for this one.
Yeah, especially acknowledging that not everyone has an LMS, right? But everyone has something. So I like that you adapted it to like how it can, that practice can be applied to anyone, right? Anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It's gonna be tough to follow up on that one, honestly, Derek.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's skip it then. Let's just
Yeah, let's
end it
just move on.
now. I'm kidding. You always have really great ones. And I always am the one that gets to go last. So you get to go last with your shifting question. I'm sure it'll be
Now I
great.
know how it feels. Okay. At least you didn't steal mine, so that is good. My question is around stay interviews and the logistics of when and why Chris does them. So, my question is, can you identify any trends where certain roles or cohorts leave after a certain amount of time on a consistent basis? His example was the entry level roles at his EMS job left after 5 years, the more like senior roles left after 10 years. And maybe in your organization and industry, it might be a crew member tends to leave after 8 months and a shift manager tends to leave after 18 months. Whatever that may be, can you sift through some data and find that, right? Are there any patterns? Looking for patterns, I think, is really important. And then, of course, challenge to test out some stay interviews if you can as well. But even just finding the patterns, I think, is important.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that one. And it just gets folks thinking. I think just so many organizations, especially if they're on the smaller side, especially if they don't have a fully built out HR function, are not necessarily spending a lot of time calculating the cost of turnover and the timing of turnover and like how much organizational burden that has. And so if you aren't tracking it, if you're not analyzing it, how can you really address it? You're just doing things and hoping something feels like it changes.
Yeah. And I think it might be for lack of like resources or whatnot. But even without nice fancy tools, there's ways to find that. It might be a little more manual, but you can go through and you can find it. And I think you can find really important things there. Maybe you realize everyone for a certain role left, no one stayed past this X amount of time. And you ask yourself why, and maybe you find an answer to that question, and then fix it and solve a problem or something. Who knows, right?
Yep. Yep. Amen.
Those
Two good ones.
Yeah, two great ones. I'm excited for what's to come, Derek. This was our first, I think our first one in a different industry other than like hospitality.
Yes. Yeah. We've had some folks that are not necessarily HR, a couple folks from like separate organizations that kind of help the workforce more
Yes.
generally. Right? But I'm thinking of Connie.
And
Uh,
yep.
Yeah. But Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, the first HR director outside of that, and very interesting work that CARC does.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting because folks that work in those organizations, uh, I think by way of the work they do, are also more conscious of how they work with employees, et cetera. So you get some cool perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Until next time. Bye for now.
Bye for now.